So guys, this is the Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra. I wasn't gonna order this thing, I wasn't gonna review it. You know, I love my iPads, but man, all that buzz around this thing has made me curious. I caved, I ordered it, and it just came in today. So let's unbox this thing together. Let's get some first impressions. Let's ramble.
Hold up, things go wild when I pull up. They all on me like it wants some.
Hey, what's up guys? It's great to see you all again. And if you're new here, I'm Patrick, and this is where I ramble about tech and other stuff. So like I said in the intro, I am an Apple guy. I love my iPads, and I wasn't planning on reviewing this thing at all. For me, the iPad has been kind of undisputed for a couple of years now, so I wasn't really interested in trying any other tablets. Now, before you start calling me an Apple sheep, I will have you know that I come from many years of heavy Android usage. Just a very quick history so you understand where I'm coming from. My first business phone was a BlackBerry. Yeah, I'm that old. Then I switched to iPhones, I think around the iPhone 2 or 3. I started to really appreciate them, and I stuck by iPhones until the iPhone 5. By that time, I could be considered a fanboy. I stood in line for the iPhone 5, I got the high-end model, and that same night, I was robbed in downtown Brussels. No more iPhone. Obviously, I couldn't replace it because the first batch was already sold out, so I went to the store and I asked the guy for the next best smartphone. He gave me the Samsung Galaxy Note 2. And I was so impressed with that thing, all the stuff it could do, and you gotta remember how super restricted iPhones were back then. So I basically went all Android, sold my iPad for a Samsung Tab, and I never looked back. This was until April 2020 when I got curious and I bought myself an iPad Pro, and man, I loved everything about it. I was surprised about how far Apple had come since I sold my iPad 1, and finally I could get all the apps I always wanted to use but couldn't because they weren't available on Android. I loved my iPad so much that I decided to also switch back to iPhone, so I got myself an iPhone 11 Pro Max at the time, and the rest is history. In fact, the 2020 iPad Pro and how much I loved it is what started this channel in the first place, and I've been pretty much focused on Apple products ever since. Now here we are holding this Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra. I caved, I couldn't resist, I wanted to know what all the hype is about, so I decided to order it. So let's unbox it and have a look at this thing. As you probably know, there are three versions of this thing: the Galaxy Tab S8, the S8 Plus, and the S8 Ultra. And since I'm using the spec'd out 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro, I thought it would only be fair to go ahead and order the big boy, which is probably the closest thing to my current iPad. It has a 14.6-inch Super AMOLED display, which is obviously even larger than the big boy iPad. It comes with the S Pen, and I'm very curious about that, and I will explain why in a little bit. But the first thing I notice is how thin and light this box is. When it came in the mail today, I wasn't even sure if this was it. But yeah, it is. So without further ado, let's get my lovely assistant Jessica and open this box. And guys, I love this part. It doesn't matter what brand it is. There's something about unwrapping a crisp new device. Oh yeah. So this is it. It's really light and really thin compared to the iPad Pro. Really, really light. Let's put it aside for now and have a look at what's inside the box. So there's some documentation, which I'm pretty confident we won't be needing. A USB-C cable, which is great. I got tons of those in the house, and as far as I'm concerned, every device should have USB-C. But anyway, here we have the ejector tool, and even though this is the Wi-Fi version, there will be a tray, not for a SIM card, but for a micro SD card. And that is one of the big advantages of these high-end Android tablets, because they come with expandable memory. Apple will never give us that because they love selling extremely expensive internal memory. And of course, here it is, the good old S Pen. Now I say good old S Pen, and there's a reason why I say that, because the S Pen is one of the things I actually did miss about my Galaxy Tab S6. If you've been to the channel before, you probably know that I like taking handwritten notes on my tablets, but as much as I love the Apple Pencil, I don't like how it feels directly on the glass surface of the iPad Pro, so I end up using a Paperlike for better handwriting. I didn't have that problem when I was using my Galaxy Tab because the S Pen for some reason had more drag, more friction, and therefore I thought it was more comfortable to write with. So yeah, I'm curious to try this thing out and see if it's as good as I remember. All right, now let's get to the point. Let's look at this tablet. This thing is absolutely huge. I do like the design and the color. This one is graphite, which is close to space gray. And you already know I'm Team Space Gray all the way, baby. So on the front, we have this massive Super AMOLED display with a notch. Now, it's a small notch, but it's still a notch. And if you've seen those Samsung commercials ridiculing Apple's notch, you understand why this is funny. Anyway, on the back, we have the camera bump, which houses a 13 megapixel wide angle lens and a 6 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, which is interesting because the front facing cameras are also dual cameras, wide and ultra wide, but I believe they're both 12 megapixel cameras. And we have this magnetic strip, and this is where the S Pen lives. To me, that doesn't seem like a very practical solution. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet, but let's see. The magnet feels pretty strong, so that's good. So around the very thin chassis, we see 4 speakers. And unlike the iPad Air 4, for instance, there are actually 4 speakers, not just 4 grills. Here we have the USB-C connector and the tray for the micro SD card. On the other side, we have the smart connectors, as well as these little grooves that I believe are for attaching the keyboard case, which I have ordered, but it will come in a few days later. And by the way, the reason I ordered the keyboard case as well is because I'm obviously gonna review this tablet thoroughly against the M1 iPad Pro. And to me, the iPad Pro is not complete without the Magic Keyboard, so obviously we'll need to test the Galaxy Tab Ultra with the keyboard to get the fairest possible comparison. And if you're interested in that and you're not subscribed, now would be a good time. I upload at least once a week, sometimes more, so plenty of fresh content coming your way. Okay, so I'm gonna boot this thing up, fast forward a little bit for you guys, and have a first look. Okay, so we're booted up, and here we can choose the way we want to log into our tablet. I'm a big fan of the fingerprint reader, so let's set that one up. It has Face ID, by the way, if that's what you prefer. The fingerprint scanner is underneath the glass, but as you can see, it is really easy to locate and it's very snappy. And you'll also notice that it's on the side where it belongs, because you're not going to use this thing in portrait mode unless there's something seriously wrong with you. You can see that the front-facing camera also is on the side, because unlike some, Samsung actually seems to realize the orientation large tablet users work in. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Apple. What is good, by the way, is that this tablet doesn't rock despite the camera bump, so that's a real plus. Now, what if we put the S Pen on the back? Still doesn't really rock. And that could actually be a nice thing for typing because it has a bit of an angle. But still, I don't really feel comfortable with the S Pen underneath. It just feels vulnerable. But I do think the magnetic back that comes with the keyboard cover will fix some of that, but we'll have to wait and see when it arrives in the mail. Anyway, let's take a look at this display because that is one of its selling points. Since this is a Super AMOLED display, now there's a lot of debate about what's better, AMOLED or Mini LED. I don't think it's that easy. I mean, AMOLED has much better contrast and better blacks, and it's generally a bit snappier. But on the flip side, it's not as bright, and Mini LED will give you great HDR. And speaking of brightness, that's probably one of the biggest drawbacks of this tablet because it has only 500 nits peak brightness, which is about the same as the iPad mini, and that's not very bright. So that might be an issue when you're outside using this tablet. Just for the sake of comparison, the M1 iPad Pro has 1000 nits of brightness and can go as high as 1600 nits in HDR mode. And of course, that is a pretty significant difference. So if we go to the display settings and we go to motion smoothness, you can see that it has 120 Hz screen refresh rate, which is very nice and it looks absolutely stunning and very snappy on the Super AMOLED display. You can bring it down to 60 to save some battery power, but that is again one of the advantages of the M1 iPad Pro, which has that Pro Motion display, which means it can adapt the refresh rate according to the way you're using the tablet. So when you're reading some text, it will be super low, and then it will jump to 120 Hz for those visually demanding tasks. So guys, what do you think? I have to say, so far, I really like what I see, but of course, the proof is in the pudding, so I really look forward to testing this thing. Also with a keyboard case, putting it against the M1 iPad Pro, and of course, I really look forward to using Samsung DeX, which theoretically turns this thing into a laptop computer. And that is of course the one thing the iPad can do, or won't do. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, please give it one of these. It really does make a difference. Hit subscribe and hit the little bell if you want to see my comparison against the iPad Pro. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one.